one side does not have this active play. This may easily happen from the queen's gambit accepted. Knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop takes c4, a6. By the way, you can get an isolated pawn position from various different openings. From Sicilian, from Caro-Can, Sicilian with c3, from Caro-Can, from Queen's Gambit decline, from Nimzo-Indian, because it's very popular type of position. And bishop e7 or even knight d7, knight c3, c5, rook d1, c takes d, e takes d. Type of position, knight b6, bishop g5. Type remains the same, as you see, as we just had little slightly different piece location. And you know, white has an outpost on e5 for their knight, which is very nicely placed. Black has an outpost on d5. That's the way Nimzowitsch explains, and I agree with him when he says that it's double-edged, and he says well, it's very, actually, in Nimzowicz's time, this position was more regarded as better for black, because they did not have sophisticated ways, there were not known sophisticated ways for white to put pressure on the king's side. It's a little bit changed, but it's a subject of discussion for a lot mostly for way advanced players. But I had to introduce this part of a pawn structure that's called one isolated pawn. As we know, one of the main aspects of positional play is the pawn structure. But pawn structure, most of the time, is strictly connected with the maneuvering. So based on the pawn structure, you can build your plan and figure out how do you want to maneuver against certain pawn weaknesses. Well, and Nimzowitsch very correctly and very nicely gives this example from the game where both sides have very strong and powerful knight. One knight on d5 for white and knight on d4 for black. Black also has an open file on open b file. But white has some advantages because, well, mainly the pawn d6 is weak. And it's white's move now, and white has to maneuver. They have very nicely placed knight on d5. Now the question is this a best position for the knight on d5? The answer is no. The best thing for white to do is to switch positions of the queen and knight. In other words, to do this. Then black is going to have significant weakness on d6, and it's going to be very difficult for them to play. So based on that, once you know what you want and you know what you're looking for, it's easy to find the correct move, which is knight to e3, followed by queen d5. And now if black plays rook b8, we can simply go b3, and our next move is queen d5 followed by knight c4. It's going to be a serious problem for black. And you see, besides having strong knights, there are other aspects of this position. For example, weak pawn on d6, and also expose the pawn structure d6 and c5. So we have two pawn islands. One is a2, b2, and the other pawn island is e4, f3, g2, h2. Black has three. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So knight e3 is a very strong move, attacking the weakness. It would have been better for us if we could somehow dislodge the knight on d4, but in order to get rid of strong knight on d4, we have to exchange it for our strong knight on d5. So since we don't want to do it, knight e3, rook b8, b3 remains as the best plan, best and very effective plan. And right now it's very difficult position. Let's try a couple of moves. For example, if black plays rook to b4, we can go queen d5, and after some move like a4, if black tries to get some pawns exchanged, I don't know, we may even go b takes a or knight c4. They are both very strong. Well, for example, b takes a is very strong because after rook takes a4, we can continue knight c4. You see, we're attacking the pawn on d6. And on rook takes a2, now we may have knight takes d6 with a critical attack on a rook on a2 and on pawn on f7. And if black goes rook a7, then I don't know, we can even play queen takes c5, attacking the rook, the knight, and you see that black's position is totally lost here. So black is totally lost here. So the weaknesses, something you have to notice, but then you have to learn a lot about maneuvering. Maneuvering should be designed against the weaknesses. Well, let me show you a couple of very, very instructive examples. When you get the weakness, how do you play against it? Weakness in a pawn structure that can be, well, here is the weakness in a pawn structure. e4, suppose e5, knight f3, and d6, d4, e takes d, knight takes d4. For example, move c5. This is a mistake. This move is a clear mistake. Now, what should we do? How should we take advantage of this mistake? Knight has to be moved, knight is hanging. Now, let's immediately, what is this c5 mistake? Why is this a mistake? It creates backward d6 pawn and weak square on d5 in front of this pawn. So we have to know, we cannot immediately figure out which piece has to go where. That's something you have to know here. What pieces, number one thing, what pieces you want to keep on the board and what pieces you get off the board. The best pieces, identical pieces, to get off the board will be to get your bishop off the board and your opponent's light square bishop off the board, the light square bishops off the board, because that makes d5 square weaker, and you want to make sure that bishop on f8 stays alive, because it's going to be a bad piece. So the good move is bishop b5 check. Probably bishop d7, bishop takes d7, and queen or knight takes on d7. Now we have to move the knight. Question: where do we move the knight? You can never figure out where what's the best place to move your piece ever if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish and where you heading with this piece. For example, we could go knight f5 or knight e2. I personally like knight e2 better. I wouldn't consider knight f3 because I don't really have much future from f3. I don't want to go on b3 because I consider this move as a weak square. But f5 or e2 I would seriously consider. Why? Because once I go to f5 or e2, then I play knight c3, and after my opponent plays knight f6, knight to e3. I want to make sure this knight is going to end up on d5. Now that you know where you want to put your knight, now let's try and execute this plan. Knight f5 I like less because it allows black to play knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn, and on knight c3, knight takes to e4. Now if we take knight takes to e4, queen takes to f5, and if we want to play knight takes to g7, bishop takes g7, knight takes e4. Now we let his bad bishop to be developed, and maybe black even castles here, sacrifices pawn. So it's a lot quieter way and sure way for white to play is simply knight to e2, and after knight f6, knight to c3. We protect the pawn, we prevent d5, and when black continues development, we do the same. After the black castles, we go knight to f4. You see, you accomplished knight going to d5. Sometimes when your knight is under attack, so you don't try to move it closer to the center. You have to find a target point where you want to end up. Those are the secrets of positional play. In this position, inexperienced player may play knight f3. However, the strong player, in 1 second, he will make one of these two moves because he will know that knight needs good outposts always. In knight e2 is the best move in this position, and any kind of attempt of queen g4 to win a pawn, for example attacking e4 and g2 pawn, cannot be successful for several different reasons. Reason one is that white can play knight c3, and after queen takes g2, rook g1, and after queen takes h2, I don't know, maybe even queen d5 or knight d5, threatening deadly threats there, or maybe even instead of going knight c3, just castle, queen takes c4. This is anti-chess. You don't play 4 moves with the queen to win the pawn and put your king and a queen on the same vertical in expense of developing your pieces. And after rook e1, queen well, I don't know, I think black is already almost lost. Knight c3 comes with a tempo. You can see that black must play here bishop e7, maybe knight c3, queen g6, knight d5, followed by knight f4. Black's position is gonna collapse in a matter of few moves. and in this position, if after knight c3 they go queen f4, then queen c6, then knight f4, and after knight f6 is going to be a while because before they castle, because right now maybe knight d5 wins right away. So the position is really clearly bad. So the positional play here is bishop b5 check. That's how we play. And on bishop d7 we play bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, followed by knight e2, knight f6, knight c3, bishop e7, knight to f4. After castling, we put our knight on d5, and if we exchange knights, then we develop the bishop on f4, you see, and then we will have to play c3 to cover our central squares, which are d4 and b4. So, and now we have very strong knight on d5, and now that we completed development, we can go queen d2, rook d1, and start putting pressure on black's d6 pawn. That's the correct, healthy plan. That's not something you should be figuring out. That's something you should know, and you should be performing it like automatically. Well, I want to show you one of the variations that was with the similar ideas, similar positional ideas.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for onlinechesslessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.